Now let us look at other factors that will determine your choice of poultry house. And one is going to be the scale of your poultry business. How big or small do you want to start? Or what are your goals towards this business that you're getting into? Do you want to be a small scale farmer or do you want to be a large scale commercial production farmer? The scale of your business will greatly affect your choice of poultry farm. Backyard poultry operations, for example, will need much smaller and less complicated housing structures compared to large-scale commercial farms. You'll also need to invest more if you're going towards the commercial aspect. The larger the operation, the larger the housing, and the greater the scope of potential risks or hazard involved. The more complex the building process as well will be involved, especially if you're doing commercial production. So as you begin and start building your poultry house, it is important for you to be able to lay down and understand, do I want to start small? Do I want to go slowly and grow step by step so that you're able to make informed decision when you begin the whole process? The other thing you're going to look at is the climate. Climate and poultry housing. The way you build your house, for example, in Asar regions is not the same way you're going to build your house in the highlands. The climate will dictate the levels of humidity, temperature, and ventilations to which your birds will be exposed to. To accommodate your birds and grant them the optimal conditions for rearing, you will need to select the most advantageous features for their poultry housing to be able to keep them having the best potential, especially for their peak production. Like I mentioned, if you're building, I'll give a classic example like in our country, Kenya. If the way you build your house in the highlands, for example, like in Nyeri, is not the same way you're going to build your house for the same kind of birds in Garissa. Why? Because the climate is totally different for the two. So it is important for you as a farmer to be able to have this in mind even as you start building your poultry house. The other thing you're going to look at is the production system that you want to engage in. Do you want to do backyard farming? Do you want to do semi-intensive farming? Or do you want to go into an intensive kind of production? That way, again, when you're starting from an informed point of view. The other thing we're going to look at is the kind of style that you use to rear your birds. How do you want to rear your birds? Do you want to use deep litter system? Do you want to do the free range or do you want to do the battery cage system? Again, this influences your decisions towards what kind of poultry house that you build, the size, and how many birds you can be able to house for the same. Because the way you build a deep litter is not the same way you're going to build a house that is going to host a battery cage system. So being able to understand from the word go, very important for you so that you're able to make decisions in the right way. How then do you select the site where you're going to build your poultry house? What should you have in mind as you go through that process? 1, preferably choose an area with no previous activity on poultry. And this is just to ensure that you're not going to an area that has had a disease outbreak before. The topography of the land should be even and not waterlogged as well. The length of the house as you consider to build should be in east-west direction in order to prevent direct sunshine over the poultry house, but rather get plenty of light and good aeration from that orientation. Choose an isolated area, preferably for biosecurity measures, and this especially for large-scale production. Why? Because if you're doing large-scale production and there's a farm a few meters away from you, the chances of diseases being transmitted from your farm or from that farm to your farm are also going to be very high. Its accessibility of this place should be considered. How are you going to access the farm or the place where you build your poultry house? There should be a plan and it should be accessible. Availability of utilities like water and electricity should be considered. How are you going to manage your litter? You should have a plan for this. Again, litter can also aid in spreading of diseases in the farm. For example, if you have an outbreak of Newcastle and you decide to remove the litter and just dump it or rather put it somewhere near the poultry house, what then stops you having another outbreak from the same litter? So litter management should not be ignored. You should have a plan in place of how you're going to do this so that you're able to continue farming and getting good results from the production.